Last weekend, Warframe released their 2025 usage stats, showing us the most popular weapons and Warframes of the year. And while of course it's always fun to take a quick look at what's hot, these stats actually show a whole lot more about Warframe as a whole and how it's doing 13 years after release. Is it still going strong, or are we witnessing the first small steps of the eventual decline? So, after a huge shout out to all of these lovelies right here, let's take a look at it and also see what it might mean for Warframe's future. But okay, just in case you have absolutely no idea what the heck I'm talking about, Warframe every year releases an overview of which weapons and Warframes were used the most and overall usage rates across the board. This last weekend happened for the 2025 stats, and if you want to check it out for yourself or even see your personal year in review, then you can do that at warframe.com/stats, or you just type in Warframe stats into Google, or maybe even ChatGPT can find that for you. You know what, you're gonna find it, But yeah, what we're seeing right here is not really all that surprising. The most played Warframe is Wukong Prime with a total of 11 million hours played. That's 1,300 years. Wukong, of course, is not really a surprise, right? He's the ultimate convenience Warframe. He works in pretty much every scenario, is very easy to play, and doesn't require a very sophisticated build to do well. And then for the weapons, this is almost the same thing that we saw last year, with the Tenet Envoy still being the deadliest primary weapon with a total of 9 billion kills, and then the most deadly secondary, also just like 2025, the Core with a similar amount of kills as well. Only change here is that we now have the Zorus as the deadliest weapon. Last year that was the Glaive Prime still. But also here, of course, the Zorus is the ultimate trash mob killer, so naturally we would see a big performance. But yeah, with the most obvious out of the way, let's now take a look at which Warframes are the most popular, and I promise you, there are some very hilarious data anomalies here. Starting out with, of course, the number one, Wukong Prime, hasn't really changed all that much in his use, so overall still a very strong contender. Just as a reference, last year's most played Warframe was Revenant Prime right now, who significantly fell off by almost 30%, and that's a little bit surprising to me because we've seen a lot more quote-unquote difficult game modes being introduced across 2025, so I would have expected Revenant to not fall off that much. But then again, after a lot of scientific evaluation, I came to the conclusion that this has probably to do with the fact that he is absolutely freaking boring to play. Then also very high up, we have Gauss Prime, which I perfectly understand, right? He's a very strong, very fun to play Warframe, and people like him a lot. As for the rest of the top spots, also nothing too surprising, right? Wisp Prime is of course very popular, Excalibur Umbra is a frame that everybody gets for free in the story, so that's why he gets a lot of views. Same goes with Normal Volt, Normal Excalibur, they're the starter frames, so obviously there's a lot of time being played for everybody who starts the game, and so on and so forth. Now, one Warframe who very much gained in usage in 2025 was Nova, especially Nova Prime, and that is of course because of the light rework that she got in 2025. Didn't change her kit all too much, but it still managed to put her back on the radar as one of the best Warframes in the entire game, and that is perfectly justified. Nova is a very good frame, and I can totally see why she gained that much use. What we see when we scroll down further is that Zaku Prime gained almost 400% usage. How can that be? Well, pretty simple. They released only in 2024, and I think also in autumn of 2024, which means naturally the 2024 performance was very low as they only had 3 months to gain playtime, which then leads for the 2025 playtime to be much higher. Then, for Valkyrie Prime, even though she was released in 2016 only, the reason why she gained so much is because A, Valkyrie got the big rework. That's gotten a lot of mixed feedback, but I think overall the community sentiment was quite positive. And then they also gave away a free Valkyrie Prime for TennoCon 2025, meaning a lot of players just got her for free on their account. Now, what surprised me a little bit was that Korra fell off pretty darn hard. Korra's always one of the most loved Warframes because she's great for farming, deals crazy damage and all that, so I was wondering what happened here, but my personal theory is that this might have to do with the pseudo-exalted rework that we saw in 2025. You know, beforehand, her Whip Claw was a pseudo-exalted weapon that could lead to some pretty broken strong damage. Then, however, the pseudo-exalted rework came, which turned every pseudo-exalted weapon, like Korra's Whip Claw, like Ash Shadow Clones and all that stuff, turned that into a moddable exalted weapon, and that kind of sort of messed up the interaction that we had with Whip Claw before. Now, the rest here is pretty stable. We have a bit of a peak with Sevagoth Prime here, which makes sense because he was released in late 2024 if I'm not mistaken. What, for me though, is much more interesting than this spreadsheet right here that shows the percentage used, is actually if we split this up by the Mastery Rank heat map. This right here shows which Mastery Rank brackets play the corresponding Warframe how much. So for example, right here we see that Excalibur Umbra is very much played in the early mid-game, but not really before, because people haven't unlocked him yet, and also afterwards not all that much, because let's be real, Excalibur is not really that much of a strong Warframe. However, and this is one of the most hilarious things that I have seen in years, maybe you can explain me that because I have zero idea what's going on here. Let's take a look at Hildryn Prime, shall we? What the heck is going on? Like from Mastery Rank 1 till Legendary 5, there is barely any use of this Warframe, and then only Legendary 6 players, like only the creme de la creme, only the most dedicated players in the entire game even play her. Like literally everybody else just doesn't. I have zero idea why that is, honestly. Maybe you can, let me know in the comments down below. If you're a Legendary 6 player, let me know why you love Muscle Mommy so much. I am curious to hear that. Like this is some really crazy data right here. And speaking about popular Warframes, let's take a look at probably the most successful Warframe launch of the year, and that would be Spider Lady Auraxia. This right here is absolutely crazy. Of course, she's relatively low on the overall usage list because she only released in the middle of the year, but if we take a look at the Mastery Rank distribution, then we rarely see such an even distribution. Like literally everybody from MR11 all the way to LR6 equally loves and plays her. It's crazy. And even though with her too, you unlock her in Deviri, something that you can't do as an early game player, there are a lot of early game players who just smack their credit card against the screen to get the frame for cash. That's the only explanation why they can play her so early. So this Warframe release is crazy successful, and that also explains why my Day 1 Auraxia guide has gotten over 100,000 views in the first 24 hours. Like, people were crazy about her, and I can totally understand it. She is great. However, one frame who unfortunately was not great is Kome. Like, the stats for Kome look unfortunately disastrous. See, Kome was released in 2024. To be more precise, on October the 2nd, 2024. Or in other words, when she released, there were around about 3 months left in the year. Within those 3 months, she managed to get 0.64% of the total playtime for the year. Now, of course, we see a drastic increase in 2025, because 2025 is a whole year and not just 3 months. But the fact that in 4 times the time, she only managed to gain like 0.30% points more of usage means people were really not digging her. Like, let's take a look at Sevagoth Prime, for example. He released in late August 2024, so roughly 1.5 months before Kome. And even though that meant he had more time to shine in 2024, suggesting a lower increase in 2025, he gained 3 times as much usage over Kome, which is crazy. Oh yeah, and of course, Excalibur Prime is the least used Warframe, as always has been, and also only by LR6 players, but hey, we all know why, right? Now, one thing that I also talked about in the intro was the overall health of Warframe as a game. While surprisingly, the developers do release all those very detailed stats, and you can even download it as a JSON file if you want to, one thing that they never seem to release and that there is no public data on is the overall Mastery Rank distribution across the entire community. I mean, sure, there's the occasional poll in the forums, or sometimes I even do that on my YouTube channel, but if you do active polls and ask people which mastery rank they are, then this entire thing is inherently biased against new players and casuals. That's why it would be so interesting to have an updated statistic on which mastery rank is played how often. That is also why I love these usage stats so much, because they kind of sort of indirectly reveal the mastery rank distribution across the game when we see stuff like Volt and Excalibur, the base versions, being still one of the most played Warframes in the game. Now, to be fair, we do see a significant drop from 2024 compared to 2025, suggesting that possibly there weren't as many new players in 2025 that there were in 2024. And if we go up and filter that by 2023, then we see the difference is even harsher right here, which would technically suggest that Warframe is slowly grinding to a halt, or at least struggling to attract new players. But I personally think that is the wrong conclusion here. And I want to explain to you why in a minute. Beforehand though, if you could leave a quick like, then that would be very nice with the YouTube algorithm. So cheers so much for your support. Now, the reason, with Volt and Excalibur in specific, losing that much playtime, I think that shows a different thing. We're not necessarily seeing fewer new players starting the game, but instead, what we're seeing right here is the effect of the Rebecca policy, so to speak, on streamlining the new player experience. Remember, over the last couple of years, we have seen a plethora of quality of life changes, especially for those players who recently started. We got stuff like specific new player mods, such as Dreamer's Bond, which helps get you started, and then other upgrades, specifically Equilibrium, becoming a force drop at the very start of the game, giving you one of the most powerful energy tools right off the bat. We got the Star Chart streamline, where they removed some nodes to make it quicker to progress through the planets. They took away the mastery rank lockout that some mandatory story quests have, meaning it is much faster to progress through the entire story now. And then so many more small changes that have accumulated over time. I personally think that what we're seeing right here is not having fewer new players come into the game. Instead, what we're seeing is new players come into the game, but they're not forced to stay on their very first starter Warframe for as long anymore, and they gain access to other stuff earlier on, which then of course reduces the playtime on their starter frame. Don't believe me? Well, then let's take a look at the weapons so I can make my point even more. Of course, when we're looking at the weapons, we have the usual suspects very high up. We have the Torrid Incarnon, of course, the Burst on Prime Incarnon, of course, Exceltra Prime, Cedo Prime, Ignis Wraith, yada yada yada, Fenmore Felarx. You know the drill, right? However, when we don't look at these specific percentages, but also filter it by heat map with the mastery ranks, then what is very interesting here is specifically the rank 2, the second most used primary weapon in the entire year, is the Nataruk. And as we see right here, the Nataruk is an early mid-game weapon, right? You get this one as a force drop from playing the new War Quest, which is why, especially in this mastery rank area, we see a lot of use. Obviously, new players don't have it and it's also not tradable, but also, very late in the game, people are barely using it either. Don't get me wrong, the Nataruk is a very good weapon, and it definitely is able to hold its own even in late-game content, but if your late-game alternatives are something like the Torrid Incarnon and the Burst on Prime, then you of course rather use those over the Nataruk if you're like Legendary 1 to 5 or something. However, the point that I'm trying to make here is that the Nataruk managed to be the second most used primary weapon, not because, but in spite of the fact that it is only used in this very brief time window here. This means that we have a significant portion of players between mastery rank, let's say 8 to 12, and all of these players manage to put so much playtime on this one weapon that it raises to the second rank. Want to have even more examples? Let's take a look at the Boltor and the Ignis Wraith. Specifically the Boltor, right? This is a very early game weapon, and it managed to be the 6th most used weapon of the year. Now you might say that is because of the Incarnon adapter, But obviously that's not the case, because nobody in their right mind put an Incarnon adapter on the normal bolt tour, and also the usage here shows that mostly we see it being played at Master rank 4 to 5, right? These people do not have Incarnon adapters. Want to have even more examples? Let's take a look at the secondary weapons. Of course, we have the standard stuff, Kuvanukor, Ladum, Okukor, and so on. But what really surprised me is that initially, I thought the Furious is so high up because of its Incarnon adapter, because it is one of the most ridiculous damage dealers in its Incarnon mode. But no. If what we're seeing right here would be the Furious Incarnon, then we would see much higher usage across the higher Mastery ranks. And lastly, to fully get my point across, let's take a look at the most used melee weapon, the Broken War. You get this one for finishing the War Within, or was it the Second Dream quest? I'm not 100% sure which one of these two, but it is a quest reward, meaning it comes with a pre-installed catalyst and all that good stuff, which is why it is mostly being used exactly across the Mastery rank bracket where you usually finish those quests. Oh yeah, and as a very final point, I promise, in case you're still wondering if I'm actually having a point here or if I'm just favorably interpreting the data, let's take a quick look at this right here. This is the 2024 stat overview that I screenshotted a year ago, and last time, as I said, the most played Warframe was Revenant Prime with a total time played of 11,333,214 hours. As we can see in the stats, this amounted to 4.96% of total playtime. Or in other words, if we extrapolate that, that means the total playtime across all Warframes, or aka the total playtime in the entire year, was 228,492,217 hours. That should be a pretty accurate representation of how many total hours the game was played. If we now take a look at the 2025 stats, with Wukong Prime being the most played Warframe with 11.7 million hours, that being 4.36% of the 2025 playtime, that means if we type it into the calculator, then the total Warframe playtime of 2024 was 268.6 million hours, meaning Warframe has gained a total of 40 million hours played in 2025 compared to the year before. This is a very strong increase, and it shows that the team has obviously made some pretty good decisions. And if you now also want to check out a full 2026 Warframe tier list, then guess what? Your boy already has one for you right here. Go check it out next. Another massive shout out to Niels V, Demon Lord Zell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nost Linux Gaming, Turtlepeer, Undercanio2, Scalabausa, Mihawki, Socrates the Almighty Rat, Leo Morazaki, Shadow Lockhart, Hantares, Patrosader, Boomia1, Mr. Games Plays, Zave, Awendai, Zengen, Quax, Henrik5984, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other hopefully in the next one, and until then, have a nice start into the week.